Thank you, Dov. With Pesach coming around, the issue at hand is this idea of kitniot. We all know that we don't eat chametz, which is any of the grains that have leavened, but amongst the Ashkenazic, we'll soon see that amongst some of the Sephardic communities also, there are restrictions on kitnios. Kitnios are beans, legumes. We'll see what it includes, and it's pretty ambiguous. It's pretty ambiguous. It's somewhat vague, and we'll see to what it does extend and why it extends, and we'll see the practical applications for us. Someone actually sent me an article that, if I forget, I don't know in my notes, remind me that I will touch upon that also. It all begins with, on the sheet that I gave you, the one that has page 5 on the left-hand side there. Okay?
5? Mine says
Yeah.
2.
So so turn it over. Okay. And we have both the Hebrew and English. This is the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is the code of Jewish law. It has 4 different parts to it. The part that we are studying now is called Orach Chaim, which is the way of life, which includes all of the daily and yearly activities. There's one portion that deals with monetary laws. There's another one that deals mostly with marriage, divorce laws. There's another part which deals with many other laws, be it kashrut, be it mezuzah, be it family purity. Orach Chaim deals with the day-to-day. So you have the daily prayer, you have tzitzis, you have tefillin, you have prayer, you have Shabbos, you have all of the holidays, all the Yom Tovim, both the Oraita, the Torah origin holidays, and also Chanukah and Purim. Okay, so in Siman Taf Nun Gimel, chapter Taf Nun Gimel in the laws of Pesach, we begin. Elu Devarim. We're starting first reading on top. Might have been a little bit cut off in the Hebrew. English has it all. Elu Devarim sheyotzim behem yidei chovat matzah. Pesach is the time that we have a Torah obligation to eat a specific food. Right? We have on Shabbos the idea of making Kiddush for the Torah, and that's Torah based, of course. That's the Zachor. In our 4-part series, we're up to the 4th part. That will be this Tuesday night, dealing with Kiddush. We've gone through Lecha Dodi, Shema, and the Shemona Esrei Friday night, and this week, Tuesday night, will be the Kiddush. So the Kiddush is a Torah obligation, as we'll learn then. However, the Torah does not say drink wine, and you can have wine, Pedros can even have bread. Matzah is the one time the Torah tells us specifically to eat this specific food. Well, actually, al matzotim, right? Well, also by some karbanos. But for us, for our practical halacha now, this is when we're commanded to eat matzah. Therefore, the Shulchan Aruch halacha goes through those grains through which a person can fulfill their obligation of matzah. Elu devarim. These are the things through which yotzim behen, a person will fulfill yidei chovat matzah, their obligation of eating matzah. And it's the grains of chitin, saorim, wheat, barley, kusmin, spelt, shibolet shual, oats, ubeshifon, and rye. These are the 5 grains. Now that's so far in the bold lettered print, that is the Shulchan Aruch, that's of Yosef Karo. In the smaller, lighter font, that is being interjected by the Ramah. V'aminag likach lechatchila chitim. The custom is ideally to use wheat that is considered the most respected, dignified of the grains. Avalo ba'ores. However, the Shulchan Aruch says you cannot use rice for your mitzvah of matzah. You can't use matzah that was made from ground rice or however it was made. You can't have a rice cake as your matzah, v'sha'ar mine kitniot, nor can you use other types of kitniot, of these beans, legumes. We cannot use that. Here, there are other kinds of non-cereal seed food. Okay, so far everyone agrees to that. The matzah needs to be from the 5 grains, not from anything else. And then the Shulchan Aruch goes further and says, "V'gam einam ba'im lidei chimutz." Now, you can't use them because matzah is something that had the potential to rise and become leaven, become chametz, and you nipped it in the bud. You made sure that did not happen. You prevented that from happening. So it's got to be something which can come to chimutz, to this leavening, and therefore the orez, the rice and beans cannot reach that process. At the very end, when we discuss quinoa, we'll see how that plays in. Then the Mechaber says, the Shulchan Aruch says, umutar la'asot mehem tavshil. You're allowed to make dishes out of this orez, out of this rice and other kitniot. Why does it make perfect sense that you would be allowed to bake with it, cook with it, do whatever you want with it on Pesach? It doesn't become chametz. What could be better than that? Right? This should be ideal. This should be the ideal choice. Right? Mutar la'asot mehem tavshil. It's mutar to make a tavshil, right? Because it does not become chametz. The Mishnah Berurah says, even if a person were to knead this rice flour and do all the things that you do, right? Even though it might seem to start to rise like actual dough will, right? He says this is not chimutz, this is not proper leavening, rising, ela sirchun. It's I see how they define sirchun. Decayed, right? It's not considered proper leavening, it's considered decaying, and therefore you're allowed to eat it. So far, that is the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch of Yosef Karo is the halacha that was presented and that represented that which had been accepted by the Sephardic communities. I mentioned before the Ramah of Moshe Isserles, who was, I believe, about 40, 50, 60 years the younger than the Mechaber. So he saw that this Shulchan Aruch was coming out and gaining tremendous fame, and deservedly so, but it did not necessarily represent the different customs that had become established for centuries in the Ashkenazi communities. So then, with tremendous humility and a tremendous want for unity, instead of him publishing his own Shulchan Aruch, which was the way of the Ashkenazim, he kept the same Shulchan Aruch and just added in some notes, some gloss. And here he adds in, Hagav v'yesh osrin. There are those that prohibit the usage of kitniot on Pesach. V'minhag ba'ashkenaz lahachmir. He says the minhag amongst Ashkenaz is to take on this stringency. Ve'ein lishanot. Ein lishanot means, and we should not deviate from that. We should not deviate from that. Okay. Why? If this is the bona fide Pesach food, because it does not and cannot become chametz, this should be the food of choice. So why is it that there is this custom amongst the Bnei Ashkenaz not to eat it? And we'll soon see just how far we do and don't go with this prohibition. So if you take a look at the bottom of the page there, here I believe you'll need to turn over. Oh no, you'll start. It's number 6, right? On the same page, number 6 down in the Mishnah Brura over here, right? There's Mishnah Brura in the Hebrew. Here's the English translation, number 6. Okay, and we'll start with number 6. And you need to flip the page to get to the continuation of number 6. Actually, we'll have the whole number 6 on that side.
Yeah, number 7.
Good. Okay. V'yesh osrin. There are those that prohibit lo me'ikar hadinhu. This is not that they'll say that the din, the law, is that it is prohibited. No one says that it's absolutely prohibited. Ela chumra shechmiru aleihem. Rather, it is a stringency that they accepted upon themselves. Uken misayim lakame, as he'll soon say. V'tam chomra zu. And the reason behind this stringency, mishum, he gives 2 basic reasons. Shelefamin tvua ma'orav b'mine kitniot. Commonly, the grains are mixed up. There are grains that get mixed up with different kitniot. Okay? There are grains that, so when you buy your beans, there will be some grains that get mixed up in there. V'yev shelevari yafeh. And it's impossible, it's certainly very difficult to properly check. So therefore, when you cook your beans or your rice, the concern is mixed up in there might be some chametz, well, some grains, and that will potential chametz, and that will. I'm sorry.
To get in there, originally it would be separate.
You know, it's interesting. You're a true blue American. I spent many years in Israel. And in Israel, when you would buy barley, or you would buy any sort of grain in a bag, there would be many others mixed in there. Yeah, where the processing would take place, whatever it was, right? You find many other grains and other things, right? Rocks. No, seriously, you really had to check it well afterwards, right? You had to check it well afterwards. So, possible reason, or reason number 1 given that this became the accepted practice, this stringency became the accepted practice amongst the Bnei Ashkenaz, is that you buy what you think is kitnios, but there might be some errant grains that have made their way in there. You cook your kitnios, you are actually cooking that grain also, and you're eating bonafide chametz. Now keep in mind that when it comes to chametz on Pesach, so then the smallest amount is problematic. It does not become batal, it does not become nullified. The smallest amount is problematic.
There are so many things processed specifically for Passover. They couldn't process beans for Passover?
Who's they?
Whatever companies are processing the rest of it.
So, at that point, not. And at this point, once the Ramah has said, now the Sfardim, those who do eat rice on Pesach, will be very careful to check that rice to make sure there are no errant grains that made their way in. Right? And we'll soon see with quinoa, we do the same thing. Okay? Nevertheless, the minhag, right? At this point, there is this concept of this has become the minhag of the Bnei Ashkenaz, to which the Ramah, he doesn't give a reason. He says the minhag amongst Ashkenaz is to be machmir ve'ein l'shanot, and we should not deviate from that, right? So without giving a reason and saying we should not deviate, it means even though you're going to find some reasons, and you might then reason and say, okay, these no longer apply, but he said clearly ve'ein l'shanot, that we are not meant to deviate from it. Okay. Va'od, second reason. Shekama pa'amim tochanim ha'orez. Many times they grind up this rice. Ushar mine kitniot lekemach. And they also grind up other types of kitniot non-grains into flour. The common ofin gamkein mehem lechem, and you can make from them. You could bake. You make to what all appearances seems to be bread. The ika hediotim, and there are hediotim, or common people, amei haaretz, non-learned individuals, tuva. There are many, many such people. Shelo yavchinu, that they will not differentiate bein kemach zeh lekemach shel minei dagan. Right? They will not differentiate between this flour that was made from these kitniot to kemach shel minei dagan, flour that's made from the actual grains. Ubein patzo, and they will not differentiate between the bread that's made from this permitted flour of the kitniot, the pat shel minei dagan, to bread that was made from different types of grains. V'atila kule gam bepat v'kemach shel minei dagan. They'll say, hey, I was in Beth Jacob. I was in the Orthodox synagogue. I was in Beth Jacob, and I saw that people were eating cakes. So obviously, cakes are okay, and they're not going to realize that there are cakes, and there are cakes, and there are breads, and there are breads. Right? And therefore, therefore we prohibited all breads and all of these types of dishes. According to that, you might say fair enough, but when it has not been ground into flour, so then it's recognizable. This is a bean. This is rice. Gam kain asru mishum lo plug. The Chai Adam says even there they prohibited because of lo plug. Lo plug means we don't want to start to differentiate. You start to draw lines here, then those lines keep getting pushed, right? And therefore, they, right? Plus, there's as you mentioned before, there's the factor that even if they are whole, there might be some other grains that have gotten mixed in, the kanal, as we said above, and therefore, these are the two reasons given by the Acharonim as to why the minhag of Bnei Ashkenaz is not to eat kitnios on Pesach. Right? Now, for the men, we're said women, if a woman marries a Sephardic man, then the minhag changes. Right? You get your kitnios. I have two nieces who married actually brothers. My cousins, they married brothers. Right? And the Sephardic. Right? So they get their rice and their beans on Pesach, but there goes the bagels, cream cheese, and lox. Everything in life is a trade-off. The Sephardim don't have cheese and don't have milk and fish together. Yeah, right. So for 8 days you get your rice. The rest of the year, no bagels, cream cheese, and lox. Life is everyone has to decide where they want to go with it. Yes, Steve.
This Marasayan thing, I have a real problem with this. And I'm going back some years when I was younger. I have a perspective that maybe not everybody in the room has. And at one point, you had to make everything yourself, almost, for Pesach, because there wasn't the plethora of companies and stuff. And now you find soup mandlin and non-gebrocks cakes.
You're making a good point. You're making a good point.
You look around at any of the stores, and people who don't know wouldn't know the difference.
Kosher Pesach noodles, you name it, it's out there. I'll tell you, last year at Ralph's, the Ralph's that closed down on University over here, they had a wonderful Pesach section, and inadvertently, they had put in the Pesach section Osem breadcrumbs. Right? And there was a fellow there who was very, very, very careful. Thank you very much. And I mentioned to him, and right away he made sure that it all went off. I showed him to make sure it's OUP, not just OU. But I'm afraid that there are people who went shopping there, went to those Pesach aisles.
I found a few things, discrepancy in that.
Yeah.
It was sort of in the front. And,
Yeah.
There's a few things there. I said,
Yeah,
what are they doing here?
I went through it and I spoke to him and I had to remove it. But it was, there are things and there are things. This was breadcrumbs, right? This was breadcrumbs, right? But the point that you're making, Steve, is many people, I'm sure, didn't bat an eyelash because everything else is kosher Pesach. Why can't it be kosher Pesach breadcrumbs? Those who are not so aware. Yeah. And so one might argue that nowadays we use, and we'll come to that, we use potato starch, which is used, right, flour, which goes, which can be used to make all these different things. So why didn't we prohibit that, right? And that will also play into the quinoa question. And basically, at this point, what we have as our custom, right? Al titosh Torah timech, the pasuk says, do not reject the Torah, the teaching of your mother. We need to follow. The generations need to follow. We never know all that went into a minhag, and it's not for us to go tinkering with these minhagim. So even though certainly an argument can be made that nowadays there's so many things that probably should have been included in Kitnios, and if they're not, why are these still included? But that is the minhag, the ein lishanos, as the Ramah says.
See, like with par creamers, initially you had to keep the container on the table to show. And
Right.
now everybody accepts that, and you don't need to put the... So,
Right. Well, it's a little different. Because we never accepted upon ourselves not to have almond milk along with our meat. We just said that it's a problem of maris ayin when it was a very rare thing. Okay? But we never accepted upon ourselves not to eat it. We never accepted upon ourselves it's prohibited to have almond milk along with your burger. Whereas here we accept upon ourselves not to eat this for those 8 days.
now, so you've repeated this phrase numerous times, and so I have to ask, who are the we who accepted upon
The
us?
Ramah. The Ramah, who was the halachic decider for Ashkenazic Jewry.
Yeah.
The same way the Shulchan Aruch. We don't say, who's the we, like the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch paskind, and that has become the code of Jewish law for Torah observant Jews.
I'm not suggesting that anybody not do any of these things.
I hope not.
How could it be only one decisive rather than the full Sanhedrin, or at least a Beit Din?
There wasn't a Sanhedrin, so this was a person who had the authority, who had the respect, who had the consensus. Right? If I would try to do it, I guarantee you, it would not work. I can guarantee you that. Right? But Rav Yosef Karo was a person. Now, keep in mind, Rav Yosef Karo was not conjuring up his own ideas. Right? There was the Tur Shulchan Aruch, which gathered all of the opinions of the Rishonim, let's say from the years 1000 to 1200, who had extracted the halacha from the Gemara, from the Talmud. That's our Torah Shabbal Peh, going back to Moshe Har Sinai. And he, right, would list a number of opinions, and one of the commentators on the Tur Shulchan Aruch is the Beis Yosef, and then he extracted further from that and came out with the halacha that he has in the Shulchan Aruch. So it's not that he came up with it, right? This was a process that had been going on for centuries, right? And he crystallized it and codified it and crystallized it, right? And the Ramah is following the vast majority of that. But when there are areas of minhag or differences or different ways of understanding the Gemara, right? As we had in the case of the menorahs, the Chanukiot on Hanukkah, right? There are different ways of understanding the Gemara, and there are different approaches. Does everyone light a Chanukiah? Does one person in the house light a Chanukiah? or we'll see also when it comes, maybe 1 week we'll do the brachas that are said on tefillin, because it's very fascinating to see in the Gemara the two different ways of learning the Gemara, and how you come out there with two different approaches. And the Sephardic approach is that one bracha is made both on the tefillin, is made, and that one bracha covers both the tefillin shel yad, the hand, and the head tefillin. Whereas B'nai Ashkenaz, the custom is you make one bracha on the hand tefillin and then a second bracha on the head tefillin. Right? So there are these differences, but for the most part, the differences are right. They're details. They're edge of the icebergs, tip of the icebergs differences that we have over here. But the Ramah was that person, and the great poskim afterwards, Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, who did have the respect of the entire Torah Jewish world, right? He didn't feel that we should now change it. He didn't feel we should now change it. So if the Ramah says Ein L'shanot, right, you're not going to get a change from me. There might be some who do. We'll discuss that a little bit.
Well, it's just it's a risk-averse approach, right? It's a very conservative approach.
It's a conservative approach. It's a conservative approach, not wanting to go into areas that are far beyond me. Yeah. Okay. Let's go a little bit further though in the Ramah back up top, and then we'll see further. So we said the minig amongst the Ashkenaz is to be strict. Ve'ein l'shanot. Me, however, pashit de'ein osrim b'di avad im naflu tocha tavshel. But let's say some of it fell in. Let's say some of it fell into a dish.
Are you on number 7?
I'm not on number 7 yet.
Oh, sorry.
I'm back. I'm reading up top now again over here. Okay. It's the bold faced on this page now.
Okay.
Up top. The Ramah continues. Now, if some kitniot fell into your stew, into your soup, into anything that you are cooking or baking, Ein osem b'diavad, you shouldn't have put it in there. But if it did go in there, it will not prohibit that into which it fell. Im naflu tocha tavshil, if it fell into a tavshil. Now, I'm looking now at number 9 by the notes underneath over there. Well, actually, let's look at number 7. We should not deviate. Even on the last day of Pesach, we also should not be lenient. Even though that last day of Pesach is an added-on day in Chutz La'aretz. But if a person is in extenuating circumstances, they don't have what to eat. Then you can cook any of these. You can cook with these. Besides the 5 grains, which become chametz, but you can cook with these. And there was halachic precedent when there was famine years, that they did allow it. Okay, there's a certain order of preference. Okay. If the person is sick, even if there is no danger to the person's life, you can cook this for him if he needs it, but you have to check carefully to make sure that there is no other grains that got mixed in. Go down to number 9. Or number 8. So if it fell in, it will not prohibit that it fell into. There with the custom is not to be strict. However, oto gargan shemotzin, if you find it, throw it out. Right? But it will not prohibit the pot. Okay? And if it's not recognizable, you can eat the entire, all the contents. Now, as long as you have majority, 51% is non-kitniot, then even though you've got 49% kitniot, you're okay. Because if you have majority of kitniot, that's not considered that it got mixed in. It is the prime ingredient of that mixture. Otherwise, it's like you're eating this tavshil kitniot itself. You're also allowed to get benefit. You can use oils that are made from these things, not for cooking, but for illumination, you can use them. So you're allowed to derive benefit from it. You're allowed to have it in your house. You're allowed to own it. It's not chametz that we say bal yira'eh, bal yimatzeh, that your owned chametz should not be seen, should not be found. You're allowed to own it. You're allowed to derive benefit from it. However, and if it mixes in, it will not prohibit all the, as long as it's the minority, it will not prohibit that which it fell into, but our minhag is not to eat it.
Rabbi,
Yes?
are you allowed to touch it? For example, if you own a bakery and you serve like non-Jews, are you allowed to
1 second. Are you talking about kitnios or are you talking about chametz?
chametz?
Chametz, not.
No.
If you own a bakery,
Close down.
you've got to close it down. Right? You cannot be owning and selling. Right? It's very interesting. In Israel, the stores that, a store owner needs to sell his chametz. And there are, right, here most of the stores are owned by non-Jews. So it's not an issue for us after Pesach going to a Target, right, or going to a Wholesome Choice and buying chametz there. Right? They didn't sell their chametz over Pesach. They don't have to sell their chametz over Pesach. They're non-Jews. Right? The problem is when you have certain chains that are principally owned by Jews, then they need to be selling their chametz. I think out over here, I think the Smart and Final certain years have been an issue. We'll have a list by Pesach. There are certain stores that are principally owned by Jews and don't sell their chametz. And therefore, you shouldn't buy chametz from those stores until a few weeks after Pesach, where you can safely assume that any chametz that they had over Pesach has since cycled out of the store. Okay, but if it's Jewish owned, you've got to, right. He needs to close down. Right, he cannot be baking bread and selling it over Pesach. I was saying in many Israeli stores, so when they sell their chametz, even though someone might still find it there in the store and that was supposed to be put away, but when they go to the checkout and it gets scanned, it will not scan. Right? They cancel or they disable all of those barcodes of anything that is chametz, right, for the duration of
They don't
Pesach.
have to get rid of it from the store?
Well, it should be out of sight. Right? The same
But they
way.
can sell it later?
No. Well, basically what they've done is they've sold it to a non-Jew prior to Pesach.
Oh,
So they're not able to sell it on Pesach. It's already been sold.
okay.
Right?
Okay.
The way it works, it gets a little bit sticky with path marks, right? With those stores here that are owned by Jews, and they do sell their chametz, right? Yet they continue selling it, to non-Jews. That gets a little bit,
Well, are they
a little
selling
bit
it,
tricky.
acting as an agent on behalf of the non-Jew they sold it to? And then the money goes to the non-Jew?
See how they structure it. Okay. Now let's come into some of the more practical cases for us. So we mentioned you don't need to sell the kitnios, and now this is from Rabbi Yirmiyahu Kaganoff, who has these beautiful halakhic write-ups. So I'm extracting now from there. Okay. I mentioned before that this is a custom. It's al titosh Torah simecha. The pasuk says that we should not reject the teaching of your mother, of your predecessors. Now, let's say some kitniot went on to the Pesach counter. Will that be a problem? What do you say?
No, you have to clean it, but no.
Yeah. Right? You want to take it off, right? And if there are a couple of specks of kitniot, even if it would get mixed in, right? Then it's right. We don't mix it in. If it got mixed in, it will not be a problem. Yes,
I'm
Linda.
somewhat intrigued because this, I can understand, was written for then. But there is nothing like that in my kitchen as a Passover. I mean, this whole month, everybody's taking everything out of their kitchen. How does it spill in pots?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm missing
let's
something.
say there's someone who's sick, who needs a certain dish, and someone who's sick is allowed to have kitnios. So it might be there in your house. It might be there in your pots.
What happens
Right.
if you have little children in your house
Yeah.
who carry things around everywhere, and despite doing b'dikas chametz, maybe something is in somebody's pocket and they wear that item
Yeah.
of clothing.
It can happen.
And it comes out.
It can happen.
Or you wash the clothing.
Well, yeah, it can happen. Right? We found chametz in amazing places as the children were growing up.
Nothing's
Found
completely
chametz.
foolproof, right?
Yes, chametz in amazing places.
Especially with children. If you think you've found everything, you haven't. Okay? You haven't.
Now, let's say I'm an Ashkenaz person, and my son had this shiloh last year. My son is in an Israeli yeshiva, and he was invited to a good friend's house for the Seder, and it was a Sephardic family. They eat kitnios, right? So they said, we will prepare for you, or some food, or we'll let you know which food does not have any kitniot. Beautiful. The only question that comes up is
Can eat it from the same pot.
the same pots, right? The pots, right? The pots we use to cook kitnios. Is that going to be a problem? Right? So you might say that it's not a problem. Why is it not? Based on what we've learned, why would it not be a problem?
It's less than half.
It's certainly less than half, right? By the pot, we're talking about that some flavoring that was in the walls of the pot might have injected themselves into the food that was being cooked there, but it's a rove majority, right? It certainly isn't. There are those that say that granted, correct, Stu, according to that clear, it would not be an issue, according to what the Ramah said about getting mixed and not being a problem. But there are those that say that the minhag was, that we accepted upon ourselves, was not even to use kitniot kalim, kitniot pots and pans, right? And there are those that say you should wait 24 hours. Now, 24 hours is that anything that might be in the pot that's coming out after 24 hours, it no longer has any
Remnant?
it becomes pugum. It becomes no longer strong, no longer effective, no longer able to affect any halachic change. So they say you should wait 24 hours. Okay. What species are included in this idea of kitnios? So the Ramah later on speaks about mustard, right? Mustard as being kitnios. Some challenge and say, why should that, right? Kitnios is not very similar to a grain. The Taz explains that its seeds grow on a stalk similar to the way that grains grow, right? And therefore the prohibition of kitnios will also include things that grow in the way that that grains grow, right? So mustard, they make these fake mustards that are kosher Pesach, but real mustard that's made from mustard seeds, so that Ashkenazim would not partake of. Canola oil, right? Canola oil is something that the custom that was disputed, and the custom today is not to use it, right? For kosher Pesach, we do not use canola. Now, if you're talking about beans, those who need their caffeine fix might be getting nervous because of the coffee bean, right? However, the accepted practice is that that's not considered kitnios, since it is the product of a tree, does not grow directly from the ground, so it is not grown in a way similar to the grains, right? There are places where the custom is not to have coffee, right, on Pesach, right? But we certainly do have coffee, but it does need to have kosher certification because of the way coffee is mass produced nowadays, right? There might be other things in that area that they process.
I look
So-
for a Starbucks symbol on my coffee.
Huh?
I'm sure it's okay.
But you want to look for an OUP,
Yeah.
right? That we're familiar with, right? There's the OU and then the P, or the star KP. All that means kosher for Pesach. How about potatoes? Potato starch, it would seem, is a wonderful, wonderful flour substitute. So if we're concerned about things getting confused with flour, potato starch really should have been included, and there were places where the custom was not to use it. But the prevalent custom is certainly that we do use potatoes on Pesach. That's from Rav Moshe, right? The prohibition was never extended to potatoes, probably because without potatoes there would not have been all that much for many of Achenu b'nei Yisrael, many of our brethren, to eat at all. Cottonseed oil. Okay. Now, cottonseed is not a food. It does not grow in a way similar to grains, right? And therefore, the prevalent custom here in America is that cottonseed oil is not a problem and it can be used on Pesach. In Israel, there are those, most hechsherim in Israel will not give a hechsher on cottonseed oil. Quinoa. And with this we'll conclude. I just mentioned an interesting article that I saw afterwards. But quinoa first came to the United States from Chile. Okay? It had been cultivated in the Andes Mountains for thousands of years, growing 3 to 6 feet tall. This is from Star K, right? Even though there's with intense weather changes. It was first grown outside of South America, probably about 20 years ago now, right? And they grow it in the Colorado Rockies. The seeds range in color from pink and orange to blue-black, purple, red. Okay, fair enough. Quinoa by Star K and the OU was determined to be kosher lepesach. It is not related to the 5 types of grains, nor is it similar to millet or to rice. It is a member of the goosefoot family. That even you, Linda, could have these goose feet, okay? Which includes sugar beets and beetroot. The Star K tested quinoa to see if it would rise. What resulted was sirchon, we mentioned before. It didn't rise, it decayed. However, there is the possibility that quinoa grows in proximity to certain grains and is processed in facilities that also process those grains, which would compromise the quinoa kosher for Pesach status. Therefore, quinoa should only be accepted with reliable kosher for Pesach certification. Okay. Now, someone sent me, let me dig it up over here. Someone sent me an interesting article.
What about corn?
Corn nut. Corn is considered in the quinoa area. I'm sorry, in the kitnios.
Wasn't there something about that there's some variety that it's only the 4 corners of what's said there, and if, like, the whole controversy about
It would be a
turkey,
bright
or
a teaching maybe.
a teaching.
Yeah.
Like with turkey, since it was a New World thing, well, corn was a New World thing, so isn't there controversy about it?
Corn is basically not used. Yeah.
There was a time when corn oil had a
Right.
hechsher, and also peanut oil had a hechsher.
So there's an article in Haaretz that someone sent me. In recent years, a growing number of Orthodox Jews, especially Western immigrants to Israel, have started rebelling against the Kitniot ban. Right? Arguing they are adapting to the Israel mainstream practice. There actually is a rabbi. Now, so that is a Facebook group called the Kitniot Liberation Front. Okay? Now, whatever the case is, that troubles me less, right? You know, they're being honest. They're not coming with any halachic justification. They're saying, we live in Israel, and here the predominant culture is Sephardic, and the food stuff is predominantly Sephardic, so we want to go along with that. Now, there is a posek mentioned in the same article, a rabbi, who issued a ruling that it is permissible to consume products and dishes containing kitniot as long as they do not constitute the main ingredient and are not directly recognizable. Now, there's halachic basis, right? Now, the only problem is that, according to the Ramah, right, his words were, Ein osrim bidi eved, right? Bidi eved is bidi avad, if it was done, if it happened. Meaning we don't go ahead and do it, but ex post facto, right, we will allow it. Right? See, he says that go ahead and do it as long as it's not the main ingredient and not recognizable. Okay? So, see, he says that it's less than 50%, and therefore it's not going to be an issue. Okay? Once again, as you said, Stu, I'm a bit more conservative. The Ramah allowed it for b'di'evet, if it happened, not to go ahead, right? In general, we have a concept, ein mevatlin iser l'chatchila. We can't go ahead and intentionally cause a nullification. Meaning, let's say I've got a 5-gallon chicken soup going. Okay? 5-gallon chicken soup. Okay? So 5 gallons is how many ounces? 5 times 64, right? Right? So that's going to be 320 ounces of chicken soup.
128. 64 is the half gallon.
Okay. So 324, so let's make it 6. Let's say about 648. Let's say 650. Okay? Now, anything less than 1/60th. So let's say it's 600. I have 600 ounces. Anything less than 1/60th, if it falls in there, it's allowed. Right? So let's say I want to take 9 ounces of milk and pour it into my chicken soup.
Cream chicken soup.
Right? It'll make it a lot creamier. Right? And on less than 1/60th. Now, if 9 ounces of milk fell into my chicken soup, I'm good to go. Right? But I'm not talking where it fell in. I want to mix it in to make it creamier. So there we say, ein mevatlin iser l'chatchila. We can't go and deliberately mix in an amount that is small enough that it'll be negated. If it happened, there's b'di'evet, and there's going ahead and deliberately doing it. Right? So, right, this person might want to differentiate and say, yes, but over here it's not really usser, it's just a minhag. Right? But clearly, for those 8 days, right, with all the other things that I eat those 8 days, actually, I think it's a blessing. Maybe that's for the minhag. Maybe that's the third reason for the minhag. I think it's a blessing not to have quite so many other things to choose from. Right? But again, so that is what there is a rabbi who is proposing that in Israel, but certainly that has not been the approach of the poskim. And maybe it's time for a change. That's not. It's not going to come from me. Not when the Ramah says Ein L'Shanot and Rav Moshe and other major poskim did not want to tread there. Yes.
So I'm confused because you went back to the cooking. If you had 51% of allowed.
Over here, you don't need 1/60. Over here, a majority would be enough if it got mixed in.
Right.
Because it's not really us.
But it almost sounded like they had cooked this, like if it was a Sephardi family, and then they had 51% of permitted, and then the 49% of the Kitniot, and it almost sounded like the guests could eat that then.
No, because that was deliberately cooked.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was a little. So you really shouldn't be going ahead and cooking a dish like that.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
According to the Ramah, according to the poskim, the general poskim, consensus poskim, absolutely
And if
not.
it's that close, if something happened and you had a spill or a fall of something, how would you know it was only 49%?
Look, as Linda said, the chances of some of it falling in are pretty small. The chances of 49% falling in is
And how you would know that that's only
No.
49%?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
Rabbi, excuse me. Isn't the spiritual meaning of all this Kitniot stuff is really gaiva?
that's chametz. That's more chametz than kidney.
Oh, okay. I
That's
thought
like-
it had to do with
yeah,
the,
that's-
the puffed
Gaiva
up
is
and-
haughtiness.
Haughtiness
right? You know,
and
being
puffed
full of
up.
hot air. The
But it all
rising.
has
That's
to
the
do with
chametz.
human,
Correct.
human negativity.
Yes.
Okay, so
But that's not Kitniot.
that's why it's
That's
so
chametz.
austere this time of year, because we are going through a renewal. Because we're going to get to Mount Sinai, and we're getting to a renewal.
Starting that process, correct.
So there's a certain purity that we take on, and so we don't look for loopholes.
right.
Even though
right.
loopholes are always possible,
Right, but
we
that's
don't look for loopholes now.
correct. But that's that's by chametz. That's not by kitnios, because
Not by
kitnios
kidney.
they
Okay.
don't rise up. So
Okay.
here it's more just technical. Sorry,
It's not related. I thought it would be somewhat related,
I don't think so.
because it said you could make it flour out of some of them,
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
it won't
don't think
rise.
so. But it doesn't rise.
but it doesn't rise. So I guess I'm missing
it's
the
the
point. then.
it's the rising that is this is more technical
Very modest
halachic
flower.
as opposed to
Then
Conceptual.
I'm missing a big point here. I understand rising,
yeah.
but if it doesn't rise, isn't
It's
it like everything else?
the grains are what leaven. The 5 grains become leavened. It's the leavening where you have that
Right,
that
but
concept.
if it doesn't if there's no leaven and it doesn't rise, which is leaven,
Then it should be allowed.
well, it's questionable then.
Well, then if it's not going to leaven, it should be allowed in Pesach, and that's why the Shulchan Aruch said it is allowed, right? But with the custom amongst the Bnei Ashkenaz is not to have it because of the reasons that we discussed.
Because it's possibly mixed up.
Mixed in or
Mixed
getting
in,
confused.
Mixed in. Okay,
Yes.
so there's that
Yeah.
possibility.
So
Okay.
Yes.
does that mean that, like, when your son went, did he, like, how did he deal with that?
So I told him to ask the poskim that he has at his yeshiva, and he was told that he can use the kelim. Yeah.
So it's like an individual.
Well, there are different opinions on the range there. So I told
So
him,
would you, as an Ashkenaz, go to Sephardic?
I personally would not. But I'm living in America, and and my son is making his life there in Israel. So I told him that he should ask the poskim at his yeshiva what he should do.
So doesn't that kind of divide Klal Yisrael? Someone is a good neighbor or something and happens to be Sephard, and they say, please, you and your family join us for Pesach, and you have to say no? I mean,
There are times you have to say no.
aren't we all Klal Yisrael?
We are all Klal Yisrael, and that's why part of Klal Yisrael we don't always have to. We can understand and respect one another's
That's
differences,
true.
right?
It is only 8
In other
days
words,
a year.
it's 8 days. Yeah.
It's only 8
Yeah.
days.
All being one doesn't mean everyone has to be like me. All being one means I could respect you with your cultural nuances, right? And with your customs, you respect me with my
So you
customs.
can't even go to their Seder.
And you can go to their cities when to eat their food. Yeah.
Rabbi, on the idea of all being one, I have a friend who goes to Israel. She's going shortly because her daughter just had her 3rd baby. When she walks down the streets in the city in Jerusalem, in the area in Jerusalem, and she says Shabbat Shalom to people, they don't answer because she looks different. Isn't there some way that we can all get together? I mean,
This is so funny.
Yeah.
This is so funny.
That happens in Los Angeles too.
does it?
That's so
Horrible.
Nobody said.
Yeah. Joe, you wanna?
Why?
Thank
One reminder and announcement, and Roberta, did you want to remind